In 1776, the British imposed taxes and tyranny on our forefathers. We shot them. From protecting your family to putting food on the table to protecting and defending your countrymen, the Second Amendment is crucial. As a criminal justice major and a hunter, I've spent a lot of time studying and researching your constitutional rights regarding firearms especially. As a fan of history, I've spent a lot of time reading and researching about the tyrannical and oppressive governments of different time periods. The Second Amendment was put in place so we can defend our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as given to every man, woman, and child in the Constitution written by our forefathers all that time ago. I will discuss what separates our nation from others and how the Second Amendment protects you, and how to respect firearms as a culture in general. I'm not trying to convince anyone to run out and buy a firearm. It's not necessarily for everyone. Some people prefer not to, and that's totally okay. All I'm looking for is for people to respect other people's right to own those firearms. Citizens of most countries don't have that right to own firearms, especially not to the extent that we as Americans do. For example, citizens of China and North Korea are not allowed to own firearms for any reason, and in many cases it's punishable by death to even possess ammunition or any part of a firearm in those countries. Another example is Honduras, which has the third highest violent crime rates and some of the most restrictive firearm laws in the world. Not proving any correlation, but there is a correlation between higher gun control laws and higher violent crime rates. Brazil, for example, is one of the highest producers of firearms in the world, and they ship to almost every country on the planet. But their firearm laws are so restricted that a lot of the guns used in crimes are made in Brazil, on their way to be shipped out of Brazil, are stolen and brought back into the country for illegal means. The right to bear arms is not exclusive to the US, but the culture behind it is. In many parts of the country, people love their guns so much, and it is extremely common to see people carrying openly on their hips in Walmarts, Targets, pretty much anywhere you go. In some parts of the country, it is very common to see firearms out in the open. In other parts of the country, it's a lot less common. More people tend to conceal carry in other parts, but there's still that presence of firearms there. There's also a correlation, especially in the US, where stronger gun control laws show that there are higher violent crime rates, especially, for example, Chicago. Illinois in general has some of the highest gun control laws in the country, but they also have some of the highest violent crime rates compared to some of the worst countries in the world. Our right to bear arms is based on the century of tyranny and colonization under Great Britain and our innate desire for independence that has lasted ever since. It's just as important today as it ever has been, with less recruits joining law enforcement and stretching our forces thinner and thinner. It is harder for the police officers that we do have to respond to every emergency that there is. It's becoming more and more difficult. The police response times are increasing exponentially, and it's very difficult for the help you need to get to you sometimes, especially in more rural parts of the country where firearms are also more prevalent. It's estimated that there's over 240 million calls made to 911 in the US each year. Now, those 240 million calls, police have to respond to majority of them, and the average response time is over 12 minutes in the US. A lot can happen in 12 minutes. There's about 310 million legal guns in the US and over 12 billion rounds of ammunition sold each year. If legal firearms were a problem, then I feel like it would be a lot more apparent. With the 310 million legal guns, there'd be a lot bigger issues, a lot more violent crime than what we do have. But the violent crime, if not all, is committed with illegally owned, illegally possessed firearms that the law cannot touch. The law is not going to stop the black market. It's been trying since the beginning of the black market. There are approximately 4,800 homes burglarized every day in the U.S. alone. In 3 out of 10 of those, a family member is home at that time. And with police response times being as high as they are, it may come down to that family member needing to defend their life with a firearm or any means necessary. Firearms only account for 3.5 out of 100,000 murders in the world, let alone just the U.S. You are more likely to be killed by a blunt object than you are a firearm in any scenario. As Adolf Hitler once put it, to conquer a nation, you must first disarm its citizens. It's also been said, you are either the most powerful man in the room, or you're nothing. Now that second one may have been said by a Disney villain, but the point remains. If you can defend yourself, you have a better chance of surviving a situation that you might otherwise not make it through if you have to rely on someone else to come and save you, like, as, for example, a police officer. One example of a good guy with a gun being the defining characteristic and the line in the sand against chaos and panic and destruction is a few years ago there was a restaurant called Zona Caliente in Texas where a gunman was a 48-year-old man named James Jones. He came to the restaurant and intended to just shoot everyone that he possibly could in just a general mass shooting style. There were over almost 24 customers and employees in the restaurant at the time, and the only one person that was injured out of the almost 24 people was one man who happened to be right in front of the shooter when he started opening fire. The shooter was stopped by a armed citizen in the restaurant, and he could have saved an unforeseen number of lives. Had he not been there, this count may be even higher. Officials even said that we do believe that he had the capacity to do much greater harm, but was stopped by that armed citizen. In a scenario that we're coming ever closer to in this country, especially now where food shelves are as empty as they've ever been, and its resources are becoming more and more scarce due to certain situations, quarantine and limited businesses and all sorts of other stuff coming into effect, that it may come to a point where one may have to use a firearm to feed his or her family, and one well-placed shot can feed your family for weeks. Hunting has been such a crucial part of our culture for generations and generations, and it's already a staple in so many people's lives. Now, if you're interested in getting a gun for yourself, I urge you to first find a local hunter safety course or an NRA safety class or a friend who knows about it to help you make your decision and inform you of how to properly handle, decide which gun's going to work for you, what you need for your gun, how to properly store it, everything that you need. Find someone to help you out. Don't go into it blind. Not liking guns, not everyone likes guns, but you don't have to like something. Just because you don't like something doesn't mean it's bad. When you don't like a show that's on TV, you change the channel, not have the whole channel banned. Now, just to prove that firearms are not an issue, I did this whole speech with a 12-gauge shotgun just out of arm's reach from me. This firearm will not do anything unless I persuade it to by manually loading it and pulling the trigger. Firearms are inanimate objects, and people have an unrealistic fear of those objects just because they do not understand them. A gun is an inanimate object and will not do anything unless made to do so. It's a tool no different from a hammer or a screwdriver or any other tool you find in your granddad's shed. Thank you.